Okay, excellent. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone today to Creative Healing for Youth in Pain's June webinar, which is all about parenting the teen and young adult with chronic pain. My name is Ashley Mateka, and I'm the new Executive Director of Creative Healing for Youth in Pain, or CHIP. For those of you who are new to the CHIP community, CHIP is an online nonprofit organization that supports youth living with chronic pain and their families by providing educational resources such as today's webinar, social support, and creative arts experiences. Our next creative arts experience is actually going to be held this July. It is CHIP Summer Camp, which is a 2-week online program for ages 13 to 18. CHIP Summer Camp includes a diverse array of workshops that encompass various creative healing techniques, which includes art, poetry, performance art, and it also provides an opportunity to build friendships with other youth who have similar journeys. For more information, please visit our website, which is mychip.org/summer-camp, and we're going to go ahead and pop that link in the chat for you as well. Today, we are joined by Dr. Samantha Levy, a clinical psychologist who works with whole families, individual children and teens, as well as parents. She employs an array of psychological orientations to help children and teens with their pain and accompanying emotional issues. Dr. Levy runs our monthly parent chip chat and also our Creating Bonds parent group. We're also joined today by our CHIP board member, Dana Pachulski, who will be moderating our webinar. In addition to being a member of CHIP's board, Dana also serves on the board of the UCLA Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital and is a board member for the Caton Children's Museum. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Dr. Levy. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. We are very honored to have our very own Dr. Levy, who has been very involved with CHIP for a long time, running parent groups, writing incredible blogs with lots of information for us, and joining us here today for her second webinar with us. So thank you, Dr. Levy. So today is about how do we help our children from the parenting side? What can we do to help not trigger? How can we help our kids find their way back? And Dr. Levy has written several blogs, actually more than several, for our mychip.org website. It goes out in our newsletters. It's full of a lot of information. And a lot of those things are what we really want to touch upon this morning, which is parenting our child. How do we get our children out of an identity of being sick? That's our main goal for today. So, Dr. Levy, how do we get our children out of an identity of being sick? It's a lofty one.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, that's really the sort of what I would call the umbrella goal. The entire goal is how do you keep your child from becoming a professional patient, or if they really have become the sick patient, the sick person as their primary identity, how do you pull them out of that? And we can talk about each of the steps, but there are so many of them. But I would say the main goal is to work towards increased independence, to really pace the recovery so that it's not going too fast or too slowly. You have to kind of do a little dance with that. And to understand the general concept that's really difficult and upsetting and tough to swallow, which is that functioning has to precede pain relief. So that means you have to get your child to start engaging in the world, doing things more independently and functioning more before their pain goes away. I think it might be actually helpful to take a step back and make sure that we understand that we're talking here about chronic pain and not about acute pain. So if your child is in an acute pain episode, like they broke their foot or they have a stomach flu, then you're going to do what you would regularly do as a parent and help them and take care of them and bring them food in bed and all of those things. We're talking about chronic pain where this is an actual disease or disorder where the pain is now become a central nerve issue, where the original illness, sorry, I'm admitting people, the original illness or injury is not there anymore. There's no harm to that part of the body, but the pain signaling is still telling that part of the body that it's harmed and not well still. So we're really talking here about chronic pain and not acute. I think we may have lost Dana, actually. She was frozen and now she's gone. So I think we lost her. Let's see if they're going to get her on. There she is. I'm just going to wait for a second while she gets back on.
Sorry, the
Hey,
Wi-Fi might went out.
yes, I saw that you were frozen and then you were gone. So I was just kind of doing a very, very, very quick summary of acute versus chronic pain, and that we're talking about chronic pain disorders here, not acute. So when we talk about functioning preceding pain relief, we're talking about chronic pain. If your child breaks her arm, then of course we don't want her to use it until it's all better. But with chronic pain, because that arm is not injured anymore, but the pain signaling in the brain is still telling you that it is harmed, it's not. And so then we have to start using it in order to have the pain go down. So with backwards parenting, that's what is one of the concepts that I talk about a lot with parents, where a lot of times over the years, parents have said to me, "Oh, well, what you're telling me to do is kind of backwards of what I would normally do." And that's very true. When you have a child, like we said, with acute pain, you're going to do everything for that child to take care of him or her. But with chronic pain, you want to try to get your child to do more for themselves, to become more independent. Some of the things that come up with parents with what I'm calling backwards parenting, for example, would be, well, my kid seems to be fine when they're Snapchatting with someone, or when they're playing a video game with someone, or when they're watching something on YouTube, they seem fine. But then when I want them to go to school, suddenly they're not okay. And that's one of the situations that I would call backward parenting, because normally, if your child will not go to school or will not do homework, then you're most likely not going to want to let them socialize that evening. But with backwards parenting, we do the opposite. We want to get your child to do whatever they can do. And the first step is often doing something that's easier or more pleasant. So I would say to the parents, okay, if you have a headache, you may not feel like working, but if someone gave you tickets to the Dodger game, you may go anyway, even if your head hurts, because that's going to be fun and it's going to be distracting. Your child is no different. They're going to do the things that are going to be more distracting from their pain. And that's great. We want to let them do that, because the more they can get distraction from the pain, the more likely the pain will start to go away, because that's additive, that those periods of distraction are additive. The other thing is that if you're trying to get your child to go to school, if they're not feeling socially engaged, they're not going to want to go. They may feel like they're out of the loop with the gossip. They may feel like people are going to question them why they haven't been there. They may be feeling just really isolated and like they don't have friends anymore. So if you can keep them socially engaged, even if they're doing no school, that's actually going to help them get back to school quicker. So those are the kind of things. That's an example of something you do the opposite of how you would with a child who doesn't have chronic pain. I would actually suggest, unless you feel otherwise, Ashley, that we could have people unmute and ask me questions if they would like to as I'm talking. I can definitely keep talking. I could talk for an hour. That's fine. But if people want to ask questions, it would be a little difficult for me to keep looking in the chat at the questions. The other option is for people to type questions in the chat. And Ashley, you can take a look at the chat and ask me the questions that people are asking.
Yes, that's perfect. And we actually already had a question come in, so I'll share that with you now.
Okay, sure.
What about when the pain episodes seem acute in nature, but it's a new area of the body and there's no medical issue that can be identified, like having acute lower right abdomen pain that seems to come with stress but can't be explained by any diagnostic testing?
Right. So that would be part of what we would call a pain disorder. So, first of all, if someone has chronic pain in one area of the body, they're very likely to get chronic pain in another area of the body. Sometimes, unfortunately, the areas will pile up and sometimes they'll migrate. So, a child might start out with CRPS in their wrist. It's a pain disorder that has to do with the nerve and joint and muscle. They may get that in their wrist, and all of a sudden it's in their arm, and it's in their elbow, and then it's in their shoulder, or it becomes in the other hand. It can migrate, and a lot of that just has to do with the pain signaling in the body, kind of going haywire, for lack of a better term. And so the brain just starts looping into this cycle of sensitivity and also of just perception that there is harm to that area, even though there isn't harm and there's just hurt. Um, with something like abdominal pain, we would, and with a lot of the pain, we would call it a functional medical disorder. So, in other words, it, a lot of times if someone has abdominal pain but there's nothing that can be seen on imaging or on labs, we call it a functional disorder, meaning they still have the pain but there's nothing that you can identify as a reason. And that can come out of nowhere, or it can come after an acute illness or injury, which is usually the case. Usually, everybody in the family gets a stomach flu, and then everyone recovers except for one member of the family. They keep having stomach pain on and on and on. The the virus has resolved. There's no virus anymore, but the pain signaling is still going, making it seem like they still have something wrong. One of the things that comes up with this concept I was talking about having your child, allowing your child to socialize, even if they're not going to school or doing any homework yet, and at the place they are in their recovery. One of the reasons, I mean, one of the things to be careful of is that you don't want to point out that discrepancy. So, a lot of times, naturally, parents will say to their child, well, why are you fine when you're doing this, but you're not okay when I want you to do homework? That would be a natural thing to point out if you don't have a child with chronic pain. But if you do, you really want to keep that to yourself and not point it out to your child for a couple reasons. One is that your child is actually making progress by socializing. Many kids with chronic pain are just in bed, not talking to anyone. So if your child's even texting someone, that's progress. So you want to actually see that as progress and not as a problem. If you point it out, then you're sending the message to your child that you don't believe them, that they're in pain. That's one of the problems, is that you're making your child feel like, oh, well, they think I'm not in pain, that I'm just faking it when it's time to do homework or go to school. And if the child thinks that you don't believe them, then they have to sort of ratchet up the complaints and the way that they're showing that they're not well. They have to increase that. And I'm not saying that they're faking it, that they're in pain, but they're going to regress in the amount of functioning they're doing so that you are sure to see that they're in pain. And we don't want them to regress in their functioning. We want them to increase their functioning so that they do get better. So that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons. The other is, if they need you to know, no, I really can't go to school yet, I'm really in too much pain and school's not distracting enough, then in order to show that, they'll just stop socializing also, so that you don't expect them to go to school, because, if you're going to point out that discrepancy. So we don't want to point out those things. The other thing we don't want to point out is when we see our child doing something that they don't normally do. For example, sometimes a parent will say, you know, my child is like in so much pain, can't barely walk, can't go up the stairs, has to sleep downstairs in a bedroom we've made up for them, something like that. And then all of a sudden, their best friend comes to the door and they go running to the door, something like that. And the parent points it out like, oh, why are you able to do that? And again, it's causing the same problem where the child will think that the parent thinks they're all better, and then they have to limp around to show that they're not, instead of trying to walk normally on their foot that hurts, which is what we want them to do. So what I always tell parents is that it's absolutely fine to point out when your child does something that they haven't done for a while. Like, for example, let's say the plan is that they go to one period of school, let's just say. And that day they text you and say, I'm going to stay for the second period. And when they get home, you're really excited because they stayed for two periods of school instead of one. So that's awesome. But you don't want to say something like, oh, that's so great that you're feeling better enough that you could go to two periods of school. Because instantly, that's when they're going to think, oh my God, mom thinks I'm all better. Now I have to show that I'm not all better and not go to school at all tomorrow. And I'm not saying that any of this is conscious, by the way. This could be completely, unconscious that their kids are doing that. So what the parents can say instead is to give praise, to acknowledge what their child is doing because it's hard work, but to also acknowledge that their child is still not well. So what you're praising is that they're functioning despite the pain. So you might say something like, wow, I am so impressed that you went for an extra period, even though you're really still not feeling well. Or that's amazing that you pushed through the pain and got to a second period. That's really impressive. You always want to acknowledge the pain. And I'll say one more thing before I see if there's any other questions, which is that it is really scary for kids to start functioning again in front of their parents. So you have to be a little subtle too when you see them doing things that they haven't done for a long time. So I will say, and I see Sabine is on this meeting and she's one of our physical therapists. Many times kids will be walking in physical therapy or in my office, and as soon as they walk out to their parents, they start limping and moaning again. It's not that they weren't in pain in my office, though sometimes they are all better and they don't want their parents to know yet. But sometimes they just need time to adjust to doing better before their parents know. And that's not that they've been faking the whole time or anything like that. It's that most of the time they're really anxious to get back to functioning. They're anxious about getting back to functioning. It's scary. It's scary to have to go back to responsibilities and to social drama and to be maybe being left out or bullied at school. It's scary to go back to a sport that they used to be the star of and now they may barely be able to do. And it's scary to go back to expectations because most of these kids, and I'm sure most of these parents here, recognize in their child that they're perfectionists, that they're hardworking, that they like to do well. And so if they're not going to do as well anymore, that's scary to them. So sometimes they need a little time. So if you catch your child walking without their cane, don't comment on it. Just let it be because you want them to just keep moving at their pace. So I'll pause here in case there's any questions.
There are a few. So two of them that have come in are basically the same question. So I believe this is going to be applicable to everyone. So I'm going to read the one and then you can respond.
Sure.
How do I help my 17-year-old with moving forward with school? He tested out of high school due to pain and inability to walk. He is now struggling with extreme loneliness and inability to see what his future will be. He's afraid he won't be able to go to work or to college because his pain it can be very extreme. Are there any other higher education concepts that can work around the pain issues?
Yeah. So there's only one thing I'm not 100% clear about. So maybe this parent can clarify. when you say he tested out, did he take the CHESP or some kind of California um, placement exam that tested the child out of school? And so now high school is done. See if we get a quick answer on that. Because the answer depends on that. Basically, I'll start talking before you tell me, and then so you have the answer, Ashley? Okay. So a lot of the time when we have a 16, 17, 18-year-old who's still in high school. Oh, yeah.
It was an English and math test that allowed him to stop going to high school.
Okay. It was probably the California proficiency exam, the CHESP.
And the other parent that had the same questions said it was that specific
Right.
test.
So often I will suggest that, just because if the high school is not giving the accommodations that your child needs, then sometimes it's actually better to test out of high school and go to a community college. So what I would say is the answer is usually getting involved in a community college. And the reason that that's really helpful, and the reason that actually college is usually easier than high school for kids with pain, is that you're not expected to be there from 8 to 3. That's a really rigorous schedule for anyone, but especially for kids with chronic pain, which often will include dizziness and um, maybe fatigue and brain fog and POTS and all sorts of other things. So um, with community college, you can go to one class or you can go to two classes, and that can be really helpful. And what I always suggest is getting involved in some kind of club, either at the community college. One of the things that can be really a lifesaver if your child has any interest in music is to join a choir or a chorus at the community college, because there's actually research that shows that choirs are incredibly healing for physical and emotional pain. So that can be helpful, or working tech at a play at the school if they can manage that physically. But just getting to even one class at the community college, and then depending on what their physical limitations are, I also suggest volunteering, because if you volunteer and you don't feel well enough that day, you don't have to feel as bad if you don't make it there as if you would if you had a real job, a paid job where you really have to make it to the job. So sometimes my clients will um, volunteer with some kind of organizations with younger kids who have similar types of things, um, or with animals. I have clients who have volunteered at nature preserves where they don't have to do a lot. They just sit and hold a snake for a while, or something like that, but they end up talking to the other people there. And so, I mean, I had a client who basically didn't do anything but and was very isolated, and she ended up volunteering at a some shelter, pet shelter, and it was absolutely, it just really changed her life, because she met people, and it was slow, and if she didn't feel well she didn't have to do a lot, and but it got her out of the house. So I hope that's helpful. In terms of college in general, I know it feels really it feels hopeless for so many parents that, will my child be able to even go to college? Will they be able to function at college? And I know that's a really scary thought, and we all want our children to have this experience. And I will say that most of my clients do incredibly well in college. Um, Sometimes they may have to take a semester off to kind of regroup on some of their treatment, but most of the time they do really well, because they can take classes later in the day and not have to wake up early. They can nap in the middle of the day. They can take, one less class and take 5 years to graduate. Um, they have friends all around them instead of having to figure out how they're going to see people. There's all sorts of combinations now in cafeterias in terms of food. I just find that they often do better in college than they did in high school. It's just less rigorous in a lot of ways.
And a follow-up to that question, once the youth or the child has done the volunteering and they're starting to feel like they're able to socialize better, how can the parent help them even just figure out a career or a job path that they can also manage?
I think it depends on whether they've gone to college or not, because usually within, if they go to college, whether they take 4 years or 5 years to go to to graduate, um, they usually start to get a sense of things that they're interested in. And oh, you know interestingly, since the pandemic, there's so many jobs that are either remote or hybrid. I don't love the idea of a full remote job because it does keep them isolated and not having to get out and move. But if they can find a hybrid job so that they can rest when they need to, sometimes, lie in bed and be on the computer, or, run and, take a little walk or do a little yoga or something like that. But that they do get out and meet people through their job also, so they're not too isolated. Um, but the key is, I think, really listening to what your child's needs are, but also always sort of pushing them a little bit. It's kind of like when your child is a toddler and you're looking towards, what they can do, like let's say with potty training or getting their own clothes on or something like that. You're looking to see where they are just about to be challenged, just that line where they can just do it, and you kind of do that little push over that line so that they can do it and feel proud of themselves. And same thing with older kids. Even if your child is 20, 22, you don't want to take their own feeling of efficacy away from them and accomplishment. So anything they can do, it's better than you doing it. And it's the system I usually use is you show them first how to do it and they watch, then you have them do it and you watch and help them, then you watch them and you don't help them, and then they do it themselves. So for someone like an older teen or a young adult, this might apply to something like emailing a professor, or going to disability services and getting their needs met, or applying for a job, or writing a cover letter. You want to make sure that you're not just doing everything for them, because then they don't feel that they're capable. But instead, you show them and you help them, and then you teach them how to do it for themselves. So a lot of it is working towards their independence in a lot of ways, so that they do feel capable of having a career, even if they are still working on their pain. I don't know if that answered that question exactly.
I believe it makes sense. I have one more follow-up in regards to that. Do you know if colleges offer accommodations for students with chronic pain, like priority registration, or if they can take classes later? And then also, with that being said, who would provide the documentation that such accommodations are actually needed?
Yeah. So any accommodation you get in college, I mean, in high school and more, exists in college. So for my clients, I will write a letter that, well, it depends on, sometimes there's a form that I fill out, sometimes there's a letter, sometimes there's both. It's different for every university or college. I will say that I have never once had one of my clients not get all of their accommodations that I've requested. It's really simple in college compared to in high school. Much easier. And I've had kids in, big public universities, small schools, Ivy Leagues, all over the place, and they all get their accommodations. So I would say they're split into kind of three categories. One is housing. So I will talk to my client about, let's talk about your physical and emotional and social needs. Should you be in a single? Should you be in a double? Do we want to make sure you're not in a triple or more, because that's overwhelming? Should we make sure you're in a double so you don't get isolated? Or should we make sure you're in a single so that you can do your guided imagery and have therapy and have your downtime and get your sleep? So It just depends on the individual. So there's going to be a housing accommodations application that you can fill out. And if you don't have a therapist, then your MD should be able to fill that out also. So that's housing. Then there's the cafeteria. So if your child has dietary needs, every college and university now provides every single dietary need that your child will have. So you'll actually make an appointment to speak with the head of the cafeteria. And when you go for orientation and to drop your child off, you'll have a meeting with that person and go through all of your child's dietary needs. And I promise you, every college they will grant it. They will make separate things. They'll have them in the allergy line or whatever needs to happen. So that is not going to be a problem. And then in terms of academics, again, easier to get accommodations in college than it was in high school. The key is that whatever accommodations you got in high school can be carried over to where you go. So you'll need either a therapist or a psychiatrist or maybe a pediatrician or internist, or may be able to come from the high school counseling office. But basically, there's another form for academic accommodations. And what I do for my clients is I fill out their diagnoses. So chronic pain disorder is an actual psychiatric diagnosis. So I will use that. And then maybe they have OCD, or maybe they have ADD, or maybe they're autistic, or maybe they have anxiety, whatever it is that will affect academic, that will affect them academically and that they need accommodations for. The language you want to make sure that the person writing your letter or filling out your form uses is that with these accommodations, they will have a level playing field in order to access the curriculum or access the academics at the same level that other people will. That's kind of the key terminology you want to have in there. So my clients will get early registration. That means that when everybody's scrambling to register and trying to get the classes, they're going to get to do that in an earlier time. Usually the freshmen get to register last and the seniors get to register first, and then because the seniors have to make sure they get the courses they're missing. But if you get early registration, the reason I have my clients do that is two reasons. One is they can try to get classes later in the morning. I never had a class before 10 in all of college ever. So our kids with pain disorders typically do better later in the day and into the evening. So we make sure that they don't have early morning classes. That's one of the keys to early registration. The other is if your child is particularly anxious, that registration process can be really anxiety provoking. And if they have ADD, they have to be really organized. They have to have their ideas of what they want to take and then their backup ones and have it all mapped out. And that might be something you really want to help them with to get them prepared. So if they have early registration, it's not quite as nerve-wracking because they're not going to see classes full on everything that they try to get into and start to freak out. So other accommodations besides early registration are things like extra time on assessments, getting to hand in assignments late. And the way that I put it is that they can have extended time on assignments due as long as they contact the professor beforehand. So it doesn't mean usually that they can just hand it in whatever they want, but it does mean that if they email the professor and say, I need extra time on this, that they'll then be able to get the extra time, but they can't do it the day of. So I'll ask for extra time, and then depending on the student, I'll often ask for things like taking assessments in a quiet environment. So they usually do it at the disability office. And then they'll get extra time and a quiet environment there. And then another one will be often having a note taker for them, so that let's say your child isn't feeling well and misses a class, that there'll be a student assigned to be their note taker. And the students who are assigned to be note takers don't know who they're taking notes for. So if your child feels embarrassed that they have a note taker, those notes, I think, go to the professor and then go to your child. I think that's how it works. And sometimes I will say that they'll have access to the professor's notes. And if the professor doesn't have notes, then they'll have a note taker. So those are some of the accommodations that we ask for. Um, Other specific ones might be to be in a dorm that's close to the buildings that their major courses tend to be in if they can't walk far. I have to like think about that one with each of my clients though, because I kind of want them to have to walk a lot. So depending on what's going on, um, I may or may not ask for that accommodation with housing. If there's any follow-up questions on college stuff, I'm happy to answer, but that's what's off the top of my head.
Great. If we see if there's any more, I'm going to pass another question and I'll let you know if any others come up about that. What if doctors have dismissed the pain as psychosomatic from the beginning and you're worried physical conditions haven't been properly ruled out yet? How do you know when it's safe to push?
That is a really tricky and very common question. That one is really hard to answer without the specific situation. Um, in general, if you if your child has had, and it's hard to say adequate because you're saying it's not necessarily adequate, so it's hard because it depends on the situation. But if your child has had imaging studies or many labs, or they've had studies where you're looking at things like, let's say, an upper endoscopy or um, a, a small bowel follow through, something where you're really looking at what's going on, and the doctors really haven't come up with anything, and you know they're at a pretty good um, health facility, or their doctors have good credentials or whatever. There does come a point where we really say it's time to stop looking for that medical reason, um, because if they really do have chronic pain or chronic pain disorder, or they have a functional medical disorder, meaning there's not going to be something you're going to find in this way, then in some ways it does do them a disservice to keep looking, because it remembered that we started out the whole webinar today with this concept that we want to pull them out of the role as a sick person. And by going to doctor after doctor after doctor, it really does kind of keep them in that role with that identity. And it makes it really hard for them to move forward and start to kind of crawl out of that identity. So um, if the pain, let's put it this way, if the pain doesn't always get worse directly when there's more stressors. For some people, it does. For some people, it's like they know as soon as they're stressed, their pain's going to get worse. For example, in that situation, it doesn't mean they don't have something medical going on other than chronic pain or functional pain disorder, but that's helpful information that means that at least we can control it with learning how to calm down the system, whether that's through psychotherapy, through hypnotherapy, through acupuncture, through Reiki, through craniosacral massage. I mean, there's so many ways that we can access the nervous system to calm it down, vagus nerve manipulation. So most of the time, we really want to work on quieting down that nervous system. And when we sort of poke and prod, we're ratcheting up that nervous system. So we do want to minimize the 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 exploration medically. And the other reason why it can be harmful is that, totally understandably, of course, every parent is looking for like the magic pill or the magic medical treatment that's going to take away all the symptoms. And unfortunately, it's rarely that simple. And by continuing to pursue medical causes, it often will keep the family from doing the things that are really going to ultimately help the most. And that might mean calming the nervous system. It might mean getting neuropsychological testing to see if they have learning disabilities and that's stressing out the system. It could mean that there are family dynamics that are just inadvertently keeping the pain going. But I always say that the families of the kids with pain disorders are the nicest families, and that's actually a problem because the parents are so nice and so caring. They're helping their child so much that the child actually doesn't get out of the sick role as easily. Um, so there's so many different dynamics that play a role that really need to be assessed. And when we're just going from one doctor to another, the resources in time and energy and money are often going to the wrong place. I know that's a really difficult concept, especially because how do you know when to know that you've done enough? That's really hard. Um, but it usually takes a doctor like a pain specialist like Dr. Zeltzer to say, okay, we've gone through everything. You've really done everything you need to do in terms of exploration medically. And now we need to move to other ideas for treatment. Hopefully that helps.
And can you clarify what does ramping it up mean? Like, how does that happen? Is it a subconscious and nervous system level?
You mean in terms of chronic pain or in terms of stress making the pain worse?
It doesn't specify, so
Okay.
maybe both.
Yeah, I will say that. So when I said that chronic pain is a disorder or a disease in and of itself, what I mean by that, and I'm not the MD here, so I'm just sort of, summarizing, is that as the brain is sending okay, let me start. Let me roll this back for a second. You touch a hot stove with your finger. The nerves of your finger sense that. That message goes to your spine, goes to your brain, and says, "Oh, that hurts. That hurts on my finger." That's like normal acute pain. With the chronic pain, you start getting the messages going the other way from the brain to the part of, let's say, I burnt my finger and it's totally fine now, but I'm still having pain. Or think of even phantom limb pain. Let's say I don't even have my finger anymore. So I'm definitely not having pain in my finger, but it feels like I am. That is coming from the brain. So what happens is, as that keeps going, the brain actually changes. So the the brain of someone with chronic pain actually looks different. That's why we consider it a disease in and of itself, because the brain starts to change. We can change it back. That's the good news. Your kids, my guess, 99% of you will, if I could see you, would be nodding your heads if I say that your child is incredibly sensitive, perfectionistic, well behaved, a people pleaser, um, probably has a learning disability, maybe on the autism spectrum, um, and may have um, questions about their sexual orientation or gender identity. 99% of you will not nod about the autism part or the sexual identity or gender identity, but many of you will on that also. So there are certain types of people who are susceptible to this type of disease, which is common with all diseases. There are certain people that are susceptible. Trying to remember why I was saying that. There's a reason I was saying that. Uh, I think I was saying it because we're talking about if your child has these characteristics, it's likely that what's happening is a chronic pain disorder or a functional disorder, because these are characteristics that are really common to most kids with pain. We're just starting to realize more and more and more how many of our patients are on the autism spectrum. We've always kind of known it at some level, but it seems to be, I think we're understanding that more and more. And some of it is that a lot of kids with pain disorders either have OCD or are on the autism spectrum, and the pain in and of itself becomes a sort of preoccupation. or they begin to fixate or perseverate on the pain, which keeps it going. Oh, we were talking about ratcheting up the pain. That's what it was. Okay. So that's a little bit about what ratcheting up the pain means in terms of chronic pain. In terms of stressors, I mean, the way that I see it is sort of like if you have asthma, the asthma wasn't caused by stress, but stress will exacerbate it. Same with something like hives or eczema. You know, people have stress hives, or um, if you're really anxious and you have butterflies in your stomach, or some people throw up when they're really nervous. It, you know, your system is going into kind of a fight or flight, and when we get stressed, we, you know, our autonomic nervous system, I mean our sympathetic nervous system, kicks in the fight or flight, and we can have all sorts of, you know, sweating and getting dizzy and heart rate going up. So those things are not so dissimilar from, oh, I have chronic neck pain, and when I get stressed my neck starts to hurt more. um when something comes and goes, that's a good indication it's not a structural problem. So, for example, I have a client with chronic neck pain. So, the family is always looking for what is a structural problem with the neck. Well, if the neck pain is coming and going, it's usually not a structural problem. If there's, let's say, a nerve that's you know, a disc that's herniated and it's pressing on a nerve, that's going to be there all the time, mostly. And it's going to be very acute. But if it's coming and going, it's usually not a structural problem, but more a chronic pain problem. And so when our brain changes, um, oh, I know what I was starting to say. Sorry about kids being all similar. It was that your kids are probably also very creative, or at least have powerful minds where they make associations really quickly. So most of your kids are going to be above average intelligence, really bright, and so their brains make these associations. So let's say a really typical example for anyone is like you get the stomach flu and then you go, "Oh, I'm never eating that thing I had. You know, whatever I ate right before the stomach flu, there's no way I'm eating that again." It takes you like years till you can eat that again. Your brain has made an association between the two, even though there's actually no link in terms of what caused the stomach flu. You were going to get it whether you had, you know, that dish or not beforehand. So what happens with chronic pain is these associations get made between, you know, every time I'm in math class, I get a headache. So I cannot go to math class anymore. And now I cannot do math homework because it gives me a headache. And all these things start to spread because if they're in pain a lot, there's a lot of associations with it. And so my point is that because their brains are very powerful, it makes these connections quickly. This is what Dr. Zeltzer calls the sticky neural loop, is that the brain is sticky. It kind of makes these connections and holds on to them. But just like their brain is really great at doing that, their brains are also really good at breaking the connections because their brains are powerful and creative. So with visualization and with hypnotherapy and with um, even visualizing their brain becoming more normal, visualizing the part of the body healing, all sorts of techniques that we use, we can change that process. So the chronic pain doesn't have to be lifelong chronic pain. It's just chronic pain right now.
Thank you. So
Sure.
we have several questions coming in. Two of them I'm going to try to at least give to you at one time. They're not exactly the same, but
Okay.
one is, um, can you talk a little bit about the interaction or the circle between chronic pain and anxiety? This parent has noticed that as a young child, the anxiety was less and the pain was high, and now they're noticing the anxiety is high and the pain is less. And another parent is asking if you can talk about the intersection between chronic pain and neurodivergence.
Yeah, so I think it's similar to what I was saying in terms of like the butterflies in the stomach. It's interesting what this parent's saying about the flip-flop between the anxiety and the pain, 'cause this is what I see a lot. Most of the time when people come to me, they come to me because they have chronic pain. And then I'll start to notice the kind of comorbid mental health issues. And then um, when we, as soon as we get the pain down or even to go away, I feel like all of those mental health issues sort of blossom in a sense, and they're right on the surface then, which is really helpful because then we take care of those. Sometimes it's the other way around, and we have to work on the anxiety or the OCD, or deal with the stress of having dyslexia, or most of the time the kids will have undiagnosed learning disabilities, and when you take a perfectionistic kid who's really smart and wants to be a high achiever, and then you add in a learning disability that they don't realize they have, it causes major stress on the system, which then often is the reason for the pain. So we kind of attack it from one end or the other, either the pain part or the anxiety part. And then when we work on one, that helps us with the other. In terms of the connection, I don't know if I'm the best one to answer that question. I think it's probably a better question for Dr. Zeltzer. But I will say that, our nervous system uh, has a lot of different levels of um, how distressed our body becomes. So if we're in what we would call the ventral level of our nervous system, we're usually feeling like safe and connected and calm. And then, um, you know, that will create a physiological state that is calm and feeling okay. But then when we dip down into the sympathetic nervous system and we start to get into that fight or flight, our bodies are programmed to do what we need to do for survival in that situation. Like if if we were back, in cavemen, and a snake jumped out of the woods and could kill us, we need to be prepared for that. And so our our sympathetic nervous systems have not changed since then. We haven't changed to, so if we're living in a war zone, then that makes sense to have that nervous system. But if we're living in a place that's relatively safe and our food source is relatively safe and our environment is relatively safe, our reactions are often disproportionate to what's actually happening. But so if your kid is really have test anxiety, let's say, they may have all of these pain symptoms and, heart racing and sweaty and dizzy and going to the bathroom, vomiting, all sorts of things from something like having a test, in the same way that someone would have thousands of years ago had that from, a snake jumping out of the bushes. Um, so we need to work on techniques to calm that system down. And then there's even like kind of a, well, I don't know if we want to call it a lower state, but sort of a lower state of your body's physiology and nervous system, which is called the dorsal state. And in that state, you may just shut down. And if you're in that kind of scared defensive mode, you may just shut down. And that's where we see kids, sort of in this physiological shutdown state where everything is sort of offline. So I would say like the psychological or mental and physiological states are really intertwined, and those affect what happens with pain or other symptoms. I hope that somewhat answers that question. And we only have a few minutes left, I believe.
Yes, so there are some other questions, so I'm going to try to hit those as well. If someone is having trouble getting the accommodation letter approved, are there any words that you can recommend or recommendations for them to speak to the doctor about getting that approved? And then do you have any specific recommendations or approaches, whether it be for an autistic child, some youth that has AMPS, just kind of resources and other opportunities for their youth dealing with chronic pain?
Okay, in terms of the accommodation letter, whether it's for high school or college, the main thing is what I was saying before about making it clear that you're saying that these accommodations will allow your child or your client or whoever, your patient, access to the curriculum, or access to the academics. Um, because they're all about the disability language is all about having equal access to the academics, to the curriculum. So that would be the main thing. And you basically want to back up every one of your requests with a reason. So for example, I'll say they need early registration because with pain disorders, sleep disturbance is typically part of the pain disorder. And these students usually do better later in the day because it's hard for them to wake up early in the morning, and therefore they need to register early in order to get later classes. So I'll say something like that. And that is, by the way, true that pain disorders are linked with sleep disorders for sort of unknown reasons, except for maybe the person's system, just like we said, is sort of ratcheted up and it's hard to calm. It's hard to get deep sleep. But also it works the other way around, unfortunately, where lack of sleep also increases pain. So we have then a feedback loop where, if you're up because of pain or other reasons, you don't get as much sleep, then you're going to have more pain. So anyway, so I back up like the early registration for that with the desire for extended time. I'm sorry, extended time before you hand in your assignments. Then I'll say like that this student, has flare-ups and sometimes doesn't feel well or is in more pain than other days or didn't get sleep and therefore can't get the work done in a timely manner. In terms of the extra time on assessments, I don't always ask for that for pain disorders. That would be requested if the student has ADHD or a learning disability or test anxiety or something like that, and you justify it with those diagnoses. So the main thing is you want to justify each thing. Sorry, I'm having allergies today. You want to justify each of your requests with the reason for it. And I'm sorry, you had a question about autism and I can't remember what it was.
Do you have any specific recommendations for resources and such for young adults with autism and chronic pain, AMPS? Do you have any specific resources or general resources that could be helpful to the group?
Yeah, I think that I have in one of my blogs resources for that. And I think maybe on the CHIP website we might. Um, and you guys can always email maybe the admin address and they can forward to me or something. But I will say that many of my clients with chronic pain are autistic, and we really work on things like social skills and doing tasks independently and how to access help and how to access resources. Um, Try to figure out what style of learning works best for them so that we make sure we match a college that works best. Sometimes it's a big university because they often have particular resources that are helpful, and sometimes the more students you have, the more opportunity there is to find people who are like you, and sometimes it's having a really small setting where they feel safer and more comfortable. So it really depends on the person. um but I would say the main thing is really working on making sure they are in a social skills group or have that um that they've worked on and done, and that typically with autistic kids there will be, not always but very often, OCD or ADHD or ADD, and so working on those issues can also be incredibly helpful. The other thing is that there's often a link between autism and um, questioning their gender identity. And that's something that's really important to be open about and open-minded about and approach your child without judgment so that they can explore those issues without being scared to do so, because that can make it difficult on them and keep the pain system going. um, the issue a lot with neurodivergent kids in general, and specifically even more so with autistic individuals, is all the sensory issues. So, you know, sensory could be like heightened sensitivity to smells, to sounds, to crowds. And so um, often it's helpful to work with a therapist or an occupational therapist specifically on desensitization, because it's hard to go to college, um, or even socialize when there are extreme sensory issues. So working with an OT on sensory desensitization is also really helpful. All these things, like sensory issues or anxiety or OCD or all these things, they keep the nervous system just much more on edge, which, like I was saying, is associated with having more pain.
Thank you.
Having a bug here.
Yes. So I want to be respectful of time. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Levy, for joining us today. This was
Welcome.
extremely, extremely valuable. There are some other questions in the chat. For those of you who we were not able to get to, I do want to apologize. And I want to share admin@mychip.org. If you want to send those questions over there, I can look to see what we have available that is already on the blog. And I can share some resources or answers to those questions that way, or I'll also reach out to Dr. Levy for answers. This webinar will be available via recording on our YouTube channel. That was a few of the questions that came in as well. If it will be available, it certainly will be. It'll be on the on our YouTube channel. I do want to pass it back to you before I wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us today?
Well, I would say that if admin collects questions and I see that there's a theme that I haven't addressed in a blog, then I'm happy to write my next blog about that. So that could be helpful also. The last thing I will say, which is just really important, it's a whole other topic in and of itself, but I think I would at least leave parents with this idea in their heads, is that no matter what is going on with your child, no matter how much they want to be out of their pain, of course, and get better, of course, there is always going to be some fear of recovery. And that's a really important concept, because, kids and parents will say, like, "Oh, I just want to get better." But I always, 100% of the time, find that there's some hesitation somewhere, whether fear of expectations of going back to everything. um that's usually what it is, that they're scared their parent will want them to do like everything all at once if they get better, like, oh, go back to full-time school, go back to your soccer, go back to your, this and that, go back to your chores. And they're scared of that because they know they won't be able to handle it. So please communicate to your child that you will go in baby steps and you will pace their re-entry into functioning, and that they don't have to be worried about those expectations, because even when they feel better, you will still honor their need to pace their recovery.